I stood there in the midst of the leased banquet hall, surrounded by the clinking of drinks and the conversation of Claire's family, feeling the weight of the check I'd written to make this Thanksgiving happen. The caterers moved easily between tables, dishing out plates of turkey and mashed potatoes, while the private chef I'd hired yelled orders in the rear to keep things flawless. I'd even paid for the special decorations, tiny pumpkins with everyone's names etched into them, since Claire thought it would make her family feel unique. I didn't mind. I enjoyed seeing her happy, and I felt it was worth it to keep the peace. Her family had a way of filling a space, their voices loud and their laughter even louder, and I was used to fading into the background. That's how it had always been with them. I didn't fight or push back. I just nodded and wrote the checks. Then Melinda, Claire's older sister, stood up with a wide grin, holding a stack of folded T-shirts. She stated it was a fun surprise she'd arranged for the celebration, something to lighten the mood. Everyone clapped as she started distributing them. I watched as her parents revealed theirs. Greatest cook for her mom, king of the grill for her dad. Nice small titles that got chuckles and smiles. Claire got family glue, and she beamed, giving Melinda a brief embrace. I waited for mine, assuming it would be something simple, maybe hard worker or good guy. Nothing extravagant, just something to fit me into their world. When Melinda handed me my shirt, her eyes had this glimmer like she was holding in a grin. I opened it, and there it was, in bright black letters. Worst disappointment. The room exploded in laughter. It hit me like a wave shattering over the tables, bouncing off the walls. Claire turned to me, her face crimson from giggling, and replied, "It's only a joke, darling. Don't take it so seriously." I didn't move at first. My hands held the shirt. The cloth was nice, but the words were rough, piercing deeper than I wanted to confess. I looked around, Melinda smirking, her dad wiping tears from laughing so hard, her mom trying to hide a grin behind her wine glass, and Claire, my wife, the one person who was meant to have my back, just sat there chuckling like it was nothing. My chest clenched, but I didn't yell or toss the shirt down. I forced a smile, the kind I'd mastered over years of swallowing their jabs, and dug into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a stack of documents I'd been holding all night, legal documents I'd spent weeks compiling. The room was still humming with their laughter when I held them up, letting everyone see. Then, slowly, I tore them in two. The sound of ripping paper cut through the noise, and a few heads turned. I didn't say a word. I dropped the pieces onto the table, grabbed my coat, and walked out. The chilly air slapped my face as I stepped outside, my breath billowing in the November night. I could still hear them inside, their voices muffled now, presumably wondering what I'd just done. I didn't care. My hand shook a little as I opened my car, but it wasn't anger. It was something else, something weighty, a conclusion. I'd spent years trying to fit into Claire's family, to prove I was good enough, and all it got me was a T-shirt that said what they'd always assumed. I got into the driver's seat and glanced at the steering wheel, the torn papers flashing in my thoughts. They weren't just random forms. They were gifts, blueprints, things I'd worked hard to give them, and I'd shredded them like they meant nothing. Maybe they didn't anymore. I started the engine and pulled away, the banquet hall vanishing in my rearview mirror. I didn't know where I was headed yet, but I knew I wasn't going back in there. Not tonight. Not ever like that again. As I drove, the words on the shirt kept appearing in my head. Worst disappointment. It wasn't just the words. It was the way they'd all laughed, like it was so evident, so true. I'd paid for their night, their meal, their expensive party, and they still regarded me as a punchline. Claire's voice resonated too, that nonchalant, "It's only a joke, babe," like I was the one who didn't get it. As I clutched the wheel tighter, I wasn't sure what hurt more, her sister gifting me the shirt, or Claire laughing along. But when it happened, I'd always convinced myself I could handle it, that I could take their small digs because I adored her. But standing there, holding that silly garment, I felt something shift. It wasn't about the money or the party. It was about me, about how long I'd let myself be the person they laughed at. The road spread out in front, dark and quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to justify myself to anyone. I just kept driving. Time. I'd spent years being the man who mended things for them, money troubles, whatever they needed, and all it got me was a front-row seat to their jokes. The phone buzzed again, another voicemail. But I didn't listen. I turned it face down and pulled back onto the road. The night was wide open now, and I felt something change inside me. Not rage, not even melancholy. Just a kind of liberation I hadn't let myself feel before. They'd seen the paperwork, sure, but they still didn't see me, and maybe they never would. I was cool with that. For once, I didn't need them to. I drove until the gas station coffee ran out, the empty cup rattling in the holder while the miles piled up behind me. The phone kept buzzing every now and then, but I didn't touch it. I didn't want to hear Claire's voice again, or Melinda's, or anybody else's trying to talk their way out of what they'd done. At about midnight, I shut it off altogether. The screen went dark, and it felt nice, like cutting a cord I'd been tangled in for too long. I didn't know where I was headed, just that I needed distance. So I kept the car aimed west until I hit the coast. The water spread out, black and unending, under the moon. I pulled into a small motel with a flickering sign that read, "Vacancy." I paid cash for a room, grabbed my luggage from the trunk, and closed myself in. The bed creaked under me, but I didn't care. I just sat there, looking at the crumbling wallpaper, letting the calm sink in. The next morning, I woke up to sunshine stealing through the blinds, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to be anywhere. No family dinner to bankroll, no Claire asking me to smile through another one of their jabs. I got up, washed, and called my attorney from the motel phone. His name's Tom, a guy I've known since the early days of my first company. He didn't waste time with small talk. I told him what happened, short version, no details about the t-shirt, just that I walked out and tore up some papers. I told him to suspend the accounts Claire had access to, the joint ones, the ones used for bills, for her shopping. I told him to take her name off everything. Melinda's too. He didn't ask why. Just said, "Give me 2 days," and hung up. I trusted him to handle it. He'd seen me build everything from scratch. He knew I didn't mess around once I made up my mind. After that, I changed my number. Didn't tell anyone. Not even Claire. I walked into a shop down the street and bought a new phone. Kept it basic. No contacts, no history. Just a clean slate. I didn't want their calls chasing me anymore. Then I packed up, moved farther up the coast, found a modest rental house overlooking the water. It was small, just a bedroom and a kitchen, but it had a porch, a place to sit and watch the surf. I stayed there a week, maybe 2, lost track of the days. Didn't talk to anyone, didn't check emails, didn't look at the news. I just sat with myself, something I hadn't done in a long time. One night, I grabbed an old journal out of my bag, one I hadn't touched since my dad died. And I started writing. Not a rant, not a list of